Okay, today is the pizza lab, and this is a nice lab for pastry chef because it's the only lab that's not sweet. You've been making pastries and candies and cookies and cakes, and now you actually get to make something that is more savory in flavor rather than sweet. A quick review, when you're using the scale, because we are weighing the bread flour, you put your bowl on here and, well, you turn it on. You can put your bowl on here and hit the tare button, which will zero it out before you weigh. And we need 14 ounces. This zero is for pounds, and this is for ounces. So as you put your flour on here, that's what'll change. Now, this is going to weigh heavy because it's going to weigh the bowl and the flour. But you can see, whoops, that we're over a pound here. There are 14 ounces of flour in the bowl, but this is already weighing the bowl. Okay? All right. Now, the first thing we need, so there's our bread flour, and as you recall, bread flour has more gluten in it. All right, it's made from a harder wheat, which has a higher level of gluten, which you need for pizza or your yeast breads. Okay, now we need 2 ounces of warm water, and there's our nice warm water. The way you know it's at the right temperature is, I don't have a straight edge handy, but I'm going to use the edge of the spatula here. You should be able to put your hand in it and not get burned. So if you put your finger in there, you should go, oh, this is nice and toasty, like bath water, but you should not be going, oh my gosh, that's hot, I got burned. Not real scientific, but it does the job. Okay, so we're going to dissolve our yeast in here. So you just kind of keep stirring. Now in review, yeast is a fungus, and as it grows, it's going to produce carbon dioxide and sugar, or actually it's going to produce carbon dioxide and an alcohol, which is what gives it that kind of an alcohol scent as it's rising and baking. And there is no, once you've baked it, all the alcohol has baked off, so there is no alcohol content to yeast bread. But you can kind of smell it. Now there are different types of yeast. There's compressed yeast, which comes like in a block or a patty, and you break it up, and usually you weigh that to use it. There's active dry, which is what we use in class, and this is what it looks like. I'll pull some out here for you. It's just granules, and that's all running between my fingers like sand. Okay, but that's granules. Okay, and then there's quick rise, which works faster than most yeast does, and that's also available at Jewel. Okay, so our yeast is nice and dissolved. So I'm going to stir this into the flour. And again, that's not very much liquid for all this flour, but we will be adding more. Okay, now we're going to add the rest of our ingredients. We need a tablespoon of honey. Now, since all the honey's at the bottom of the bag, I'm just going to cut a corner down here to make it a little easier to get the honey out, rather than having to take it up the whole layer of the bag. Honey is very messy. Now, some things about honey. Honey is the only food that will never spoil. They have found honey that is thousands of years old in the old Egyptian pyramids, and once they cracked off the sugar that had crystallized on the top, the honey beneath was just as fresh as the day the bees made it. Also, honey is our sugar in this pizza dough, and the purpose of sugar is to feed the yeast, so that is the food for the yeast. And then we're adding some olive oil, which will make it nice and rich and add a little bit more flavor to our yeast bread. And then we're adding salt. And salt is an inhibitor in yeast bread. An inhibit means it kind of blocks it or keeps it from doing something. And in this case, it's going to keep it from rising. So we want the bread to rise, but we don't want it to rise crazy-like. All right? Now we also need to add 6 ounces of water. And this water can be cool. 6 ounces is also 3/4 of a cup. So the only water that has to be warm is that water that is dissolving the yeast. Now there are cool rise recipes that can also be used, but all of the recipes we use in our class involve warm water. Okay, now you may have trouble getting the water to absorb all the flour, and that's no problem because we're going to knead this for 5 minutes, and that will help us incorporate the rest of the flour in here. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually get a little bit of flour on my hands and sprinkle some on the counter. Now this was all cleaned before we started, but you do want to make sure your work surface is clean. Okay. And all the extra flour did come out of the bowl that had not been incorporated in. And so we're going to knead this for about 5 minutes. So the way you're going to do that is kind of get it into an oval. You fold the top to the bottom and press. Turn, fold, press. Turn, fold, press. And you just keep doing that for 5 minutes. So we'll be back in just a few minutes to show you what we've been kneading for 5 minutes. So let's take a look at this. First of all, you see it's nice and smooth. Everything's been incorporated in. It's no longer sticky. And that's a good sign that you're done kneading. If you take a look, you can see these little blisters have broken, and that's another sign that you are done kneading. Okay, so it's been nice and it's ready to go. So what you need to do next is, it's kind of like when you go out and you sit out in the sun, if you don't put on any type of oil or lotion, your skin gets real dry. Well, this has to ferment, which if you remember, that means it's going to rise, and that alcohol is going to be produced as the yeast grows and eats the sugar. So we need to make sure the outer edge of this is oiled, or it's going to get real crusty. So I'm just going to pour a little bit of oil in the bowl. You don't need to have a lot. There should not be a puddle. Your dough should not be swimming. And I'm going to put it in here, spin it around, flip it over, and you can see all the sides are oiled. Okay? Now, in class, what you're going to do is you're going to take plastic wrap, and I have my students go around the bottom, around the top, and back over in both directions, so as this dough rises, it can't blow the plastic wrap off the bowl. A lot of the students like to make this at home, and in that case, you don't need to put it in the refrigerator. You can simply cover it with a towel and set it aside. If you're fermenting your dough at room temperature, it takes an hour, so this will sit for an hour with a towel over it. In lab, we don't have that option, so you'll put it with saran wrap and it will ferment in the refrigerator in about 24 hours. So I will see you when this is fermented and ready. Welcome back to pizza. So in class, your dough would have been in the refrigerator overnight, and it should have risen, and you can see that this has risen. It's much larger than it was when it went in. In our case, I just had the towel over it at room temperature. So as you recall from the steps of making yeast bread, after it's fermented, all right, then you punch down the dough, and you literally just take your fist and punch it down. And the dough's nice and soft. Okay, it's full of air. You can pull it out of here. And now you're going to round it. Now, students, being the impatient ones they are, so eager to eat their pizza, want to roll this out immediately so that they can move on. But what happens is as you're stretching it, it just goes right back where it was. Well, at this point, the gluten is very, very active. And so that's why it just keeps shrinking back. It just wants to go back to where it was. So if you will let this sit for just a few minutes, then it'll roll out and behave. All right, so we're going to let this rest, and we'll be okay. We are back, and I've let the dough rest so that it'll behave better for us. You're more than welcome to try spinning it into your circle. I'm going to use my hands. Some students like to use rolling pins, but a rolling pin doesn't really fit in here very well, so that doesn't work well. I actually find that the hands are just much easier. Now you can see how easy this is spreading. If I would have done this right after I punched it down, I'd still be working. I'd be fighting the yeast bread. Now if you're an impatient person and you're up for a good fight, go for it. But you will eventually win, but you just have to keep at it and be bigger than the dough. Now some students like to roll out their pizza crust bigger than the pan, and then they put cheese in the crust and roll it up, then in the pan. That's fine. You can do that. You can put sauce and cheese in there. You're more than welcome to be creative with this. All right? And I'm just trying to even this out. You can see like there's a couple air bubbles, and at those spots the crust is very thin. So I'm just trying to even this out so it's the same. There, get some of that air out from there. Now this is going to continue when we put it in the oven. It's going to rise, so it's the crust is going to get thicker, and this outer rim here is going to get nice and big. Okay. So we have our pizza sauce. So I'm going to take a ladle
And you can use the ladle for spreading, which is pretty much what they do in all the pizza stuffs, in all the pizza stores. Pizza oven, pizzerias, there's the word I'm looking for. Okay. Now you're welcome to make your own pizza sauce from scratch. This is pastry, so we would make our own pizza sauce in cuisine. Pizza sauce is significantly thicker than a marinara. You could use a marinara recipe and cook it down so a lot of that liquid evaporates. And some people like a lot of sauce, some people just like a little sauce. Again, that will be personal preference depending on the people in your group. Okay. And then we have some grated mozzarella. Now for lab, you're welcome to bring in extra toppings. We typically supply you the cheese. If we have extra onions and stuff, you're usually welcome to use them. Some students like to bring in sausage or pepperoni, mushrooms. Some bring in ham and pineapple. You're welcome to doctor up your pizza however you would like. Now what you're going to do is you're going to put this in the oven until the cheese is bubbly and starting to brown. I personally like my cheese a little bit more on the darker side. Some people like it just getting ready to melt. Okay, so this is going to bake in a 400-degree oven, and then you can serve. All right, we'll be back. Our pizza has just come out of the oven, and as you can see, that yeast bread rose, and then our cheese is nice and brown, and it's all done. Now it will cut a little easier for you if you let it rest just a few minutes before you start cutting. All right, enjoy.